This is Michael Popok, and by the looks of things, it's time for Legal AF After Dark, a prosecutor podcaster, a defense lawyer prosecutor. We come together every Wednesday on a show we call Legal AF, and we debate what's going on in the Trump trial. There is no channel on YouTube that is covering the Trump trial the way MeidasTouch and Legal AF is. You want to find out why we call it Legal AF? You've come to the right place. We just got through, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, former prosecutor, and me, just got through analyzing all 19 witnesses, including Michael Cohen, the only way we know how without blowing smoke or sunshine. Take a listen. So let's dive into the trial. I don't think you and I are going to be opposed or debating this, but let me throw out, you and I didn't talk beforehand, so let me throw it out there. I am personally very impressed with Michael Cohen, how he's composed himself, how he's responded to things, the way he's adopted his response technique has been, for me, very honest, very authentic. He admits what he obviously has to, but he does it in a way that I think is almost endearing, especially when by contrast, Todd Blanchard, I think, is doing a terrible job. He made it all about him in the cross-examination. We'll talk about the direct first, but in the cross-examination, it became all about, you don't like me, and you called me a little shit, or whatever he said from social media. That's how he led off things. I would not have led off with that. I would have led off with Michael's well-documented issues in places presided over by judges and in cases to kind of orient the room to who Michael Cohen was. But that's not what they did. They almost, for me, played well into Michael Cohen's hands. And Michael, who I thought did a gentleman's B in testimony in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case. Of course, the result was an A+, $465 million judgment. But I thought Michael himself seemed very nervous in that one, sort of shrunken. But now for this one, at this moment, all ego laid at the courthouse steps before he entered the room, and just, I thought, did a very, very good job. It's the best job I think the prosecutors could have asked for in putting Michael on. But that's enough about me. Let's turn to you, Karen. What did you think about the direct and Michael's performance, and then where Todd Blanchard looks like he's about a third of his way into his cross-examination? And again, to remind people, we're on a dark day today, a down day today in the trial as scheduled. So he's off on Wednesdays to accommodate Legal AF, I think. And then on top of that, there's like a short day tomorrow, and then there's Barron graduating fundraiser in Minnesota Friday. So we're getting the bulk of what we need to talk about right here on midweek. Go ahead, Karen. Sorry about that.
No, so one of my absolute favorite things about you, Michael Popok, is the sun literally never sets in Michael Popok world. It's true. Everything is always positive. Everything is always great, and it's amazing, actually. And it's a way that I aspire to be, because I'm the one who's always like, well, it's very early. We still have a long way to go.
My co-host, the Grim Reaper.
I know, but it's so, I just love it. It's literally the sun never sets in Popok world or Popok land. Anyway, so it is still early. So I am guardedly optimistic at how Michael Cohen is doing, but it is still very, very early in the cross. And I think that tomorrow's cross-examination is what's going to make or break this case. Unfortunately or fortunately, Michael Cohen is a critical witness in this case. And the prosecution pre-corroborated absolutely everything they could pre-corroborate, which the direct of Michael Cohen was just brilliant, in my opinion, the way they set this up. And I think they realized that he was going to be key to this case. And so what they did was they pre-corroborated him. The whole beginning of the trial was a setup for his direct examination. All these quote unquote boring witnesses where they introduced phone records and that no one knew what they were about or why they were irrelevant, or text messages or calendar entries, all the things that they had to painstakingly put into evidence. It's boring. It takes time. It interrupts the flow. You don't want to interrupt Michael Cohen's flow by he's telling this really riveting part of the story, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, hold on, directing your, I'd like to show you what's marked for identification as People's Exhibit 53. Do you recognize this? Yes, I do. What do you recognize this to be? Is this a fair and accurate representation of, blah, blah, blah? Is this what it's like? And all of a sudden his flow is interrupted. And all of a sudden you're like going down the rabbit hole of some, phone record that the defense didn't want to stipulate to. Fine. So they did a really smart job at introducing all of that into evidence, which means you don't have to interrupt his flow. It means they're already in evidence. And so, because there's these foundational questions that you have to ask in order to get something into evidence. And that's like, it's like a technicality, but it has to be done. So they did that all in advance through other witnesses. So every time he spoke, and his entire flow of what happened, and they just were like, and okay, is this an example? Is this what you mean when you say that this recording was interrupted by a phone call? Is this the phone call? Is this your phone records? Is this the time that it happened? Okay, great. And so it just kind of showed to the jury. Number one, it showed that evidence got to be talked about twice. So that's always a good thing, to reinforce strong evidence to a jury. But number two, it showed that everything he said was corroborated. It's corroborated. It's corroborated. And it's not that corroboration is necessary. If you believe someone and their credibility, that's enough to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't have to have corroboration in New York State court for a criminal conviction. However, in this particular case, because there are some obvious issues with Michael Cohen's credibility and his bias towards, or against, I should say, Donald Trump, and that there was some extremely obvious to anyone who's a lawyer or a practicing lawyer of what those cross-examination areas would be. And that those were so obvious that the prosecution absolutely predicted every single area and decided to take the sting out of it, decided to deflate the balloon before it could blow up. There's no, aha, isn't it true that you did this, that you did that? It all came out. And the prosecution's not hiding from it. Michael Cohen's not hiding from it. They're like, yes, I did all these things and I am who I am, just like Stormy Daniels, this authentically owning who she is and not hiding from it, not running from it, not sugarcoating it. And so they set themselves up brilliantly and perfectly. And so I thought the direct of Michael Cohen was just absolutely brilliant on the part of Susan Hoffinger, who has spent most of her career as a trained criminal defense attorney. So I think that gave her a great, she was a prosecutor too early on in her career, but this gave her a great perspective in terms of what the most effective way to present Michael Cohen would be. And because she was a defense attorney for so long, she knows what the cross would be. So she was able to prepare him and prepare herself for what to put into evidence, how to corroborate him, and how to handle all of the issues in the case. Now,
before you move past direct, what was the most compelling one or two, whatever you like? What do you think Susan was able to establish with Michael that resonated with the jury?
That's a great question. I think that what resonated was it's a great question. I think that the two things. Number one, it was clear through Michael's testimony that of course Trump knew about this. And that wasn't clear before. Mm-hmm. That wasn't, it was obvious and there was no other explanation, but it was clear that, yeah, Trump knew about this. He was intimately involved in all of it. And he caused the falsification of business records to occur. Now, I say the word caused because the other direct and cross-examinations of the other witnesses was all about, well, Donald Trump doesn't know that there's only a drop down of this, not that, and for 5 minutes there, you had some people worried, oh my God, are we going to be able to prove the falsification of business records charge, right? Because that's what this is about in the end. This is about the calling it legal fees when it's not legal fees, when it's, all the actual false entries in the records. And they were doing kind of a decent job at distracting people in terms of, well, how would Donald Trump know that Alan Weisselberg and Michael Cohen decided to call it this, or invoice it like that, or do it a different way? And that was kind of a good point, right? They did what they needed to do there. And there was a few people who were a little bit concerned, and they were like, oh my God, we have to tie Donald Trump to that. But when you reread the law and you reread the jury charge, it's not just making the false entry. It's also if you cause the false entry to be made. And Michael Cohen did a brilliant job, I think, on direct at closing that small gap and showing that this absolutely, without a doubt, they could have easily just paid back the $130,000, right?
Right.
And this wouldn't have been a crime. Just pay him back. Let Michael pay it back. It's an NDA, whatever, and then you're done. But no, they decided they wanted to hide it. They didn't want to have to declare it to the campaign. They didn't want to have to pay taxes on it. They didn't want to have it tied back to Donald Trump. And so what did they do? They structured it so that we're going to, call it legal payments. We're going to gross it up for the income. We're going to, set it up so that you pay it back over time and call it something different. They even have this, I think it was Exhibit 35 and Exhibit 36 was like the best exhibit I've ever seen, two exhibits I've ever seen in my life. Like, when do criminals actually draw a picture with flowcharts of how and call it like?
Here's the bank. You're sitting in the getaway car. You open the vault.
Exactly.
Hand me the cash.
Exactly. So yes. So that's
let me jump in on with you. This is exactly this attempted sleight of hand of trying to make it look like Alan Weisselberg, who we'll talk about him in a minute, and Michael Cohen went rogue and did this of their own accord, out of the goodness of their heart, to pay off Stormy Daniels and record it in the books and records without the boss knowing. They tried this sleight of hand, this magic trick, in front of the jury 2 years ago, led when Susan Necklace was also the lawyer for the Trump Organization major subsidiaries for tax fraud and business record fraud. And the jury came back with a 17-count conviction because they didn't buy that. So the fact that they're trying to pull this elephant out of a hat again and try to make it look like, well, Donald Trump is just so busy that he would never know. Right. We're not saying he pulled out a pen and entered it into the books. We're saying that, as you said, he caused it, a part of the conspiracy, led the conspiracy to do all of this. Did you have another direct gold nugget that got developed by Susan Hoffinger and Michael?
I mean,
there's so many.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many. I think what Michael Cohen really did a great job is painting the urgency around the election. In other words, if there was any doubt that this was election related, there's no doubt that this was about the election and only about the election. And I thought Michael Cohen did a really great job at again eliminating
I agree with
this
you.
about Melania part.
If he did nothing else, tying Donald Trump as the leader of that conspiracy to cause those books and entries, and then the second crime, right, the second shooter, the election interference, which they have to prove in order to make the felony, that's Michael Cohen. I mean, that's why Alvin Bragg finally had to get right with Michael after he wasn't originally, when Mark Pomerantz was pushing him, about having Michael have to prove some fundamental elements of the crime. Let's switch to Cross. I have to laugh already. Oh, Todd Blanche, why don't you outline from your perspective the cardinal sins and violations of cross-examination 101 that Todd Blanche committed in front of the jury, and then how Michael Cohen is artfully handling that cross-examination, with the caveat, I agree with you, we're only a third of the way up the mountain. We're not even at base camp 3. I get you. And we got to get to the top of Mount Everest. There's a long way to go without oxygen. But how do you like the approach so far and how Michael's doing?
So there's great lawyering. There's good lawyering. there's bad lawyering, and then there's ineffective assistance of counsel, which can cause a reversal. Just to give you the whole scale of where lawyers
I
fall.
thought you were going to end with, and then there's Todd Blanche.
No, no, I'm giving you the whole scale. Had Donald Trump gone with Alina Habba, for example, as his lawyer in a criminal case and was convicted, I actually think they could be set up for an ineffective assistance of counsel claim. That's how where I think she falls, that type of lawyer. And I just think she really is not qualified to be a criminal defense attorney based on what I've seen in her other civil matters. And then you have really good lawyering, and I think the surprise really, really good lawyer that I've seen so far is Emile Beauvais. He's done a few cross-examinations. He's surgical. He gets in and out. He's effective. And, he's
for those that are tuning in, Trump's lawyer that is the partner colleague of Todd Blanche in their office. Yeah.
Yes. And he's not considered one of the lead lawyers. He was someone no one had ever really known of as a criminal defense attorney, whereas Todd Blanche and Susan Nicholas are well known and have really good reputations amongst defense attorneys. But I think Emile Beauvais is doing a really good job, actually, and is kind of rising up as this good defense attorney cross-examiner. Susan Nicholas, when she cross-examined Stormy Daniels, I thought it was not her best cross. And I got the impression, because of what I think the tactical mistakes that were made, if I were a defense attorney now, I'm thinking about it from that perspective, I got the impression that was largely driven by the client, because I think she is good enough that if she were permitted to do her own tactical cross-examination, I don't think she would have gone into certain areas that she went into or taken a different tactic. I could be wrong. I don't know. It just seemed like she's better than what I saw there. And then we get to Todd Blanche and Michael Cohen. And again, it's early. He has all of today to prepare because there's no court on Wednesday. So we'll see what happens Thursday. But I mean, there is a cross-examination of Michael Cohen that is blistering and, frankly, potentially devastating to the prosecution. And Todd Blanche didn't even scratch the surface. In fact, if anything, he started out in the weirdest way. He made it personal, which you don't ever want it to be personal. That's very strange. It's almost like you're pitting your credibility against the witness to the jury, and that's not at all. It shouldn't be about you. And he asked Michael Cohen. He started it with, you called me some name, and I can't remember what it was. And Michael Cohen's like, yeah, sounds like something I would do, like a dipshit or something like that. I don't remember, but like you have something against me, like. You never make it personal. Or a prosecutor. That's just not appropriate. And it's more importantly, not effective. And then he, look,
and the judge sustained what's his name? Blanche got 3 objections out of the first 2 questions, and they both got shut down. He knows better than that, but go ahead.
No, and also when the transcript came out later, because they were up at sidebar, when the transcript came out later, apparently Judge Merchan was talking about, like, don't make this personal. What the heck? Like, even Judge Merchan was surprised by this. So yeah, it's totally, totally bizarre. And I just don't think, he went right into this whole, first of all, he then started talking about MeidasTouch, right? And the MeidasTouch network and, his podcast. And he
Which
got
we appreciate.
But he got some basic facts wrong that, anyone should be able to tell what it is. And Michael Cohen corrected him. He attributed our merch store, for example, to Michael Cohen, and it wasn't. Go ahead.
Sorry. No. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It had nothing to do with him. And the reason that's significant is it makes you look bad to the jury. It's like, well, when you're using something to cross-examine someone, and let's say they don't come clean, you want the jury to think you're right and they're wrong. But if you got it wrong, that's not good. You lose credibility to the jury. And don't forget, he's already lost credibility with the judge.
How do you get such fundamental things wrong? And then you've gone, first mistake, I agree with you, was going down the rabbit hole of let's go over all of your TikToks and all of your social media postings about my client. And let's get into, von Schitzenpants and turds and orange dust and whatever Michael likes to use on his things, which is very entertaining. That's not where I would have started. But by the way, as long as we're talking about, because people are now interested, and and as I joked on my X post recently, welcome Todd Blanche, our new head of marketing for MeidasTouch. So we do have an actual MeidasTouch store.com. Thank you, Salty. Right, you know where my head was going. So if you want to buy the stuff that only Michael Cohen has talked about and Todd Blanche doesn't understand, go to store.MeidasTouch.com. You can get all of our Legal AF stuff and Convict 45 and all the rest of the stuff that now is part of legal lore. But I digress. All right, welcome back. That was Legal AF. We do it just like that at the intersection of law and politics. We do it on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time right here on this YouTube channel for MeidasTouch, and then on audio podcast platforms wherever you pick them up from. If you know everything you need to know about Legal AF, you're already a part of our audience. We really appreciate you. And just send that clip. We call it Legal AF After Dark for a reason. Send that clip off to friends and family and ask them to join us. Maybe after taking a listen or a watch, they will. Or if you don't know what I'm talking about, that was Legal AF, and I'm Michael Popok. And I invite you to join our full-length 1-hour episodes every Wednesday and Saturday right here. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.